if there's an election called, then we're ready for that. And we look forward to taking to the country a very ambitious programme to transform Britain for the better.
Well, Tony Blair thinks it's a big risk. He feels that Labour would struggle with any election. I mean, he's used this term, it's an elephant trap, because it's tactics, it's strategy, it's a good chess game that's going on.
I mean, it's certainly tactics and strategy, but of course not all the cards are held by the Prime Minister. Gone are the days when Prime Ministers could go to the palace and ask the Queen to dissolve Parliament and call an election at any time. Of course, for there to be an early general election in the Fixed-Term Parliament Act, within the 5 years of the Parliament, the Prime Minister of the day also needs the consent of the House of Commons, 2/3 of MPs. And what is the elephant trap, and Tony Blair is right here, would be for the Prime Minister to be given carte blanche by the House of Commons and for us to then crash out of the European Union in the middle of a general election campaign because the date would be set by the Prime Minister.
No, the elephant trap is that a lot of people fear Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister more than they fear a no-deal Brexit.
Well, I'm not sure about that, and let's put that to the
Would you bet your house on it?
Well, let's put that
That's
to the
a no
test.
then, you wouldn't.
Let's put that to the test in a general election, Eamonn, because, the fact is that we're given the opportunity to put forward a set of policies that will offer a very different direction of travel for this country, a fairer, more equal, more open society, investment in our public services. It's not just about the issue of Brexit, it's about the 5 years of government of this United Kingdom. And I think that given that opportunity to put forward that programme of transformation, I think we can win the argument and the hearts and the minds of the electorate.
So would you go for the election rather than a second referendum, or just to stay in there and prevent a no-deal Brexit?
Well, it depends how things play out this week. I think that the first option has to be to stop a no-deal Brexit through legislation. Because, remember back in 2016 when we had the referendum campaign, it was led by Boris Johnson and Michael Gove on the Vote Leave campaign side. Their election literature, their election campaign promised us leaving with a deal. It said that Brexit was a carefully considered proposition, not a swift stop, and yet we're heading for that swift stop.
Did they actually promise a deal?
It did promise a deal. It's still there online, in their manifesto, in the Vote Leave referendum literature. It's very clear we would be leaving with a deal.
Jeremy Corbyn, he says an election, if it was called, would be the democratic way forward. But surely Brexit, with or without a deal, is also the democratic way forward, or the democratic deal that was there in the first place, because that's what most people voted for.
Well, democracy doesn't stand still, for a start, and what we've seen is that we've had the referendum, we've had a general election, we may well have another general election before we sort this issue out. But ultimately, democracy is about the views and the opinions of everybody. It's not just about the views and opinions of the majority of people, it's also minority views. And what is most abhorrent about the prospect of shutting Parliament down, I can't believe that a democratically elected government has proposed this, is that you're silencing the views of alternative views. That is not...
Is it wrong? Is that not just winners over losers?
Well, no, because democracy doesn't work like that. I don't stop being a Labour person because the Labour Party didn't win the election. I don't stop believing in my values because last time round the other lot won, and vice versa. Democracy is about a plurality of views and opinions, and you can't just drown out and shut those views and opinions up.
Boris Johnson says whatever you will be involved in, whatever the Tory rebels are going to do, joining up with Jeremy Corbyn, this will be another pointless delay. How would you respond to that?
Well, we haven't passed most of the legislation that we need to pass in order to have a smooth and orderly exit. So it won't be a pointless delay. And as I said, this is coming from a Prime Minister. I voted to get us out on the 29th of March. If he had voted previously in the ways that I did, we would have left by now and we wouldn't be discussing this.
Boris Johnson could find himself in a situation where A, he's not allowed to leave the European Union without an agreement, and B, he's not getting the general election that he wants. And I sincerely hope that that brings Boris Johnson to his senses. He said in 2016, during the referendum, that we would leave the European Union with a better agreement than the one we currently have. Now, a no deal is no agreement whatsoever. So if everything we do in the next few days results in Boris Johnson having to resort to a plan B rather than his fantasy of a no-deal Brexit, then we will have, in my view, done a great service for this country.
I'd rather have a referendum, but I don't mind a general election either. I think that one of those two things are the only ways that we're going to resolve this, and I'm delighted that Jeremy has now moved into a position where Labour supports a referendum in all circumstances, and we would campaign for Remain. But I don't think a binary issue like this, which is basically a choice between a crash-out no-deal Brexit and Remain, is best solved by a general election, because the general election brings in all sorts of other issues, naturally, the health service, the economy, blah-de-blah, whereas this is a binary choice for our country, and I think the only way of resolving it, and I've thought this for a long time, is to give the people the final say. And, Boris Johnson could surprise us all if we get to the position that Philip has just outlined, where he can't get a general election, he can't get no deal. Why doesn't he put his no deal to, if he's so confident that's what people want, why doesn't he put it to the people in a referendum, and then we can move on and deal with all the huge challenges this country faces that have just gone totally neglected in the last 3.5 years.
That the people's vote would go your way?
If it was a choice between no deal and Remain, pretty confident, Eamonn. I mean, none of the polls show more than 25% of the population would support no deal. And I think when the reality of no deal were publicised, if you like, in a referendum campaign, and all the people in the health service, in business, were talking about the impact on them, I'm pretty confident. And I think people are fed up with Brexit. They want it over and done with one way or another. And I believe when faced with the stark choice of a crash-out no deal Brexit and Remain, they come down on the side of Remain. Particularly now we've got a lot more young people who've come onto the register who are much more keen on
You're
staying
right, there
in the
will be
European
people
Union.
saying we do want to sort it out one way or the other, and Boris is offering us that choice, that chance.
But he's not offering a choice that was the one that was sold to the voters back in 2016 when no one talked about the possibility of no deal, and he's not offering a choice that has got the mandate either from the people or from Parliament. What he's been trying to do is close down Parliament, mount a coup against our parliamentary democracy, and I think today and tomorrow you're going to see very historic events in this country where Parliament is wresting back control from an unelected Prime Minister who's behaving more and more like an autocrat.
If you listen to the Prime Minister, if you believe the Prime Minister, he's not the most believable person in British politics, let's face it, given his history. But if you were to believe him, let's give him the benefit of the doubt for a second, you would have expected that there would be on the table some work through proposal. Chancellor Merkel of Germany said, you've got 30 days, mate. We're nearly 10 days into that. There's been no proposal. I've just come from the House of Commons chamber. Philip Hammond, up till now, recently, the Chancellor of this country, someone I was proud to serve in a coalition with. We worked hard together for the interest of this country. He asked the question, where's the report? Where's the proposal? And guess what? Boris Johnson didn't answer the question. I think that Johnson's in a mess. I think he's very uncomfortable. He lost control of the House today. People were not showing him any respect. I've never seen a Prime Minister shown such disrespect because...
It was rowdy, it was bawdy, wasn't it?
Because he doesn't deserve it. He can't make his argument. He's all over the place.
This government continues to limp on. It will continue to have a long-standing agreement with my party, and we'll probably get an extra £1 billion for Northern Ireland for the next year or next number of months. But that's not the best way to run this country. I mean, we're here, and we have very different points of view, but we're here ultimately to get the best for our nation. That has to be one of our key priorities. And the best for our nation is not to have an impotent Parliament. It's got to be a Parliament that can do things.
I'd agree with that, obviously.
But what do you see, Rosie, as best for our nation?
Well, I want us to take the deal, whatever it ends up being, and we haven't even got Boris suggesting any kind of deal at the moment, back to the people. I want us to do that before we have a general election so they know what they're voting on. Because let's face it, it is a Brexit election. They don't know what the deal is. They only know what we don't want, and we don't want a no deal. And Boris refused today to commit to any kind of deal.
I'm still seeing things as glass half full. Sure. It was toxic under Theresa because we fiddled about for 2.5, 3 years. We didn't deliver Brexit. We didn't get on with it. And we couldn't get the deal through the House of Commons because you had a very irresponsible, in my opinion, Labour Party that's very good at knowing what it's against, which is anything Conservative, but couldn't actually vote for anything and fundamentally refused to accept the undertaking that they made in their manifesto to respect the referendum result. Now, some of them, like really nice guys like Stephen Kinnock and a few other decent Labour MPs, and I saying, we'd love to vote for a deal. Well, you had 3 chances to vote for a deal. The deal that we're going to end up with, with anyone else but Boris will be very similar to the deal that we had under Theresa, and they voted against it 3 times. So I am one of those people who is fed up to the back teeth on this issue because we need to get on and deliver Brexit because it's an issue of trust. And then, look, Boris is right. There are so many other things. There's education, there's health, there's crime, there's foreign affairs. I was in Hong Kong this weekend. It's all kicking off over there. We've got to actually get back to politics as normal because there's a lot going on in this country. There's a lot going on in this world. And people, my folks on the Isle of Wight, 62%.
I was going to ask you, what is going on the Isle of Wight?
They just want us to get on with it. If Boris can't call a general election because Parliament prevents him, if Boris can't negotiate because Parliament's binding his hands, effectively the Parliament is doing what it can to render the decision of the British people null and void. And I think that's pretty disgraceful. And I think that is contempt. That is treating the British people with the level of disrespect that I think is wrong.
Remember, this Prime Minister was elected and then he had one day and where he was answerable to Parliament, and then he had the whole of the summer off, and now he's back. This is like, yesterday was his second day, and he lost this massive great vote yesterday on his second day in business, and then today he had to answer questions from the whole of the House on a whole range of different subjects. He got very red in the face. He got very upset. I know him well because he used to be, when he was Foreign Secretary, I was Shadow Foreign Secretary, I used to ask him questions. And the thing about Boris is that he doesn't really do detail. He doesn't really bother. He thinks he can kind of get away with things by being funny and by using a good turn of phrase and by going hobble, 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 hobble. I don't know. It's just the most extraordinary noises he makes when he doesn't know what to say. And because he's posh, I don't know, he seems to get away with it. But it's now not funny because he's the Prime Minister and we're in really serious times. And he doesn't seem to be able to grasp how serious it is. And he was asked some pretty tough questions and just didn't answer them. Sometimes the speaker says, I'm going to, order, I insist that we hear the question and we hear the answer. He's actually stopped saying with Boris, hear the answer. He says, hear the response. Because we weren't getting any answers. We are not at war with Europe. That is really terrible language to be using. In order to surrender, it means you have to have been at war. We're not at war. These are our friends. These are our neighbours. A lot of Europeans are our partners, our lovers, our bosses, our co-workers. We're not at war with them.
The reality is we have to press on with this. I speak as someone who campaigned very strongly for Remain. But I have voted 3 times for a deal, and I believe absolutely the Prime Minister is right, we have to leave. The reality is, I wish the Labour Party had supported the withdrawal agreement on the 3 occasions when we did bring it back, but if there is genuine movement, I'd like to see it. But the truth is, it's all very well Kinnock talking like that. They're all going to vote for this proposal tonight, as they did last night, to try and block the Prime Minister, to try and extend this, and we will be a never-ending.
But why are you saying the Prime Minister's right, we have to leave? I mean, as a committed Remainer, I do understand you serve in the government and
I'm a Democrat. It's really simple. If you lose the election, if I lose a general election, it's over. If I lose a football match, it's over. The referendum was lost. We have now been 3 years, and my constituents are turning around to me and saying, "Why haven't we left?"
So if Dominic Cummings was sitting where Eamonn is sitting now, which is next to you, if Dominic Cummings was sitting next to you now, you would have no rancour.
I would say to him, Dominic, you are partly responsible for this because of what you have done in the last few days and your tone to some of my colleagues and your desire to, I think, create a sort of Brexit party out of the Conservative Party is the straw that has broken some of our camels' backs, if you follow my tortured analogy.
And he's not, in fact, a member of the Conservative Party?
I gather so. I don't know him. I met him briefly outside the cabinet room yesterday, and I think that advisors advise, ministers govern, as somebody said today, my friend Margaret James. And this is the Prime Minister's government. This is the Prime Minister who takes responsibility for this, and he's got to sort.
For Britain to leave the European Union in such a disorderly and irresponsible way would rupture our relations with the European Union, the very people who we are going to have to negotiate in the future if assuming we leave the European Union,
not just part
a trade
deal
that will secure our future jobs, investment, and
Johnson would
livelihoods.
say he doesn't really want to do that. He's prepared to do that, and therefore this strengthens his hand for any deal that he's trying to get.
Shall I tell you something, Eamonn? Up until a week ago, or possibly even the beginning of this week, oddly, I was prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt. I tell you why. Because I think it's so irrational and so illogical for any government to seek to inflict that sort of risk and potential damage on the UK economy. I really didn't think, based on all my experience of government in this country, that any government would do that. Now, what's changed my mind?
Right.
What's changed my mind is that I've spoken to a number of former colleagues, people I know, both in Brussels, in the European Commission, where I once worked, but also in national capitals. And I've checked and double-checked and asked them, are there any proposals coming from the UK government? Are there any ideas? This 30 days that Mrs. Merkel's invited Boris Johnson to take advantage of in bringing forward alternatives to the Irish backstop, have you seen hide or hair of that? No, we have not. There is no negotiation, therefore, taking place from which the legs might be cut out. I mean, I think it's all a game of charades.
So let's move.
I didn't think that before, by the way, both because of things I was hearing and picking up, and both because you sort of assume that governments do follow a sort of rational, logical course of action and behaviour. So I really didn't think it then, but I do now.
The big change in this country over the last 3 decades has been, one, the glass ceiling is shattered. This is now a country that anyone, regardless of race, religion or background, can make it to the top. Look at our cabinet. 2 Asians, one as Chancellor, one as Home Secretary. It's not long before there'll be an Asian as Prime Minister of this country. That glass ceiling's gone. The other thing, entrepreneurship being champion. In the early 80s, entrepreneurship was looked down upon. Del Boy, second-hand car salesman. Today, entrepreneurship is champion regardless of which political party is in government. That is just wonderful what has happened. But yet, since Brexit, in the last 3 years, I've never experienced any discrimination before. My gosh, have I faced discrimination. Go back to where you've come from. Awful things. Handwritten letters with people putting their address, not hiding behind tweets and trolling. People actually saying
not stop
horrible
them drinking
things.
your beer, though, will
They're not. Thankfully, they're still drinking
So
the
as
beer.
a member of the House of Lords, who's been nothing but an enormous success story, as you personally have been, you are now being subjected to levels of abuse that you would regard as being entirely unexpected.
Totally. For years, nothing. And then suddenly, 3 years ago, during the referendum campaign and afterwards, I faced racism that I never faced before. Racism, discrimination, awful, hurtful. I said, we've come so far as a country, we're going backwards. And that's why I think we need to stop this. We need to come up with a deal. We need to move on and remove this uncertainty and get back to the global Britain that we always have been.
So Joe Johnson, walking out on government, he said he put the national interest ahead of family ties. Forgivable or not forgivable? 0344 499 1000. But yet, Andre, it may be a reflection, might hold a mirror up to the rest of the country where people are saying, I'm Brexit, I'm not Brexit, I want to remain, I want an extension, I want a second referendum. Maybe it just shows how divided we all are.
It does and it doesn't. To me, and I don't know if other people are going to read it in a different way, to me it is saying, I do not believe this man is competent to be Prime Minister, but because of my disagreement with him on this issue. Now, I think that's very different to having a disagreement, because we all know that everybody's rowing about Brexit. We all know that everybody's got a slightly different view. I mean, I meet people that are as supportive of a no deal as I am, and they might have a slightly different way or a nuance of doing things. We all know we're divided. divided, but actually it's that effectively saying, I cannot work with this man because he's incompetent. And when it's your brother, I think it's dastardly.